I'm Matthew McCabe. Welcome to Miracle Voices. Each episode, we will be delving into stories of forgiveness, healing, and transformation that have come about from integrating the principles of the book A Course in Miracles. If you want to learn more about A Course in Miracles, visit www.acim.org. If you'd like to visit the Miracle Voices site, please go to www.miraclevoices.org. If you feel inspired to make a love offering, please visit us at miraclevoices.org/donate. All donations go to support the work of the Foundation for Inner Peace, the publisher of A Course in Miracles. Now here's your program. Hello, everybody. This is Matthew McCabe. Welcome to another edition of Miracle Voices. I'm here with my co-host, Tam Morgan. Tam, how you doing today?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited. We're kind of doing a funny role reversal that's not a role reversal.
Yeah, say that 3 times really quick.
I couldn't even say it once.
Role reversal.
I get to interview you.
Yes.
I'm so excited.
Yes. So we've had a number of listeners ask if we could do a Matt interview where Tam interviews me and kind of share a little bit about who I am and my background for people that are interested. So with that, we can jump right in. I mean, we have some questions that have come in periodically, and Tam has them and I have them. We'll just kind of go through them, I guess. I think that's the best place to start. Okay.
Yes. I want to start.
Go ahead.
Okay. Matt, who the heck are you? We know nothing about you. You're just a wonderful voice in interviews. And who are you?
Okay. That's good. So I'm Matt McCabe. I'm a 48-year-old dude who travels the world with his wife and kids. And gosh, that's one thing that people have a lot of questions about. I guess I'll just address that right there, is that for the last 10 years or so, my wife and kids and we've been traveling the world on and off, a year or two out of the country, and then a year or two back in the U.S. And we just kind of travel around. First in Chile was the first place we went, and then mostly in Europe after that. And right now I'm sitting in the south of Portugal in a region called the Algarve, which is really a great place, great weather, just really beautiful, nice place. And we kind of fell into this lifestyle because really just unsatisfied with traditional life, kind of the suburban lifestyle. We wanted something different, and it seemed like a radical change at the time. But after we tried it once in 2013, we were like, wow, this is definitely feasible. With Airbnb was just starting to become a thing, and Uber and all these different technologies that made it easy to do, and high-speed internet that you can really work from anywhere. So that's kind of how I got my start. My also the big impetus for me too, which Tam and I were just talking about before we pressed record, was this book called The 4-Hour Workweek that I read. I was working at a big tech company, and that was my day job. And I read this book called The 4-Hour Workweek by this guy named Tim Ferriss, who was in San Francisco at the time. And it is a book about confronting your fears and lifestyle design. And so he has in this book where he makes you go through an exercise where you define your fears. What are your worst fears if you live the life you want? If you could extricate your life or extricate yourself from the life that you're in into the life you want, you first have to confront your fears. And so he has this fear setting exercise that I did. And I went through, defined all my fears. I leave my day job, I go broke, all these bad things happen. And he makes you write a recovery plan so you could get back on track if the worst case scenario happened. And then if the middle of the road happened, which is not the worst case, but somewhere between the best and worst. And obviously you can handle the best case scenario. So you're figuring out what your fears are, writing them down. And that allowed me to kind of catapult myself out of corporate America and get into working for myself in internet marketing, search engine optimization, and affiliate marketing. And it was a great thing for me. Search engine optimization, if you're wondering, is just trying to get your website to rank highly in the search engine so people can find it when they type in their query. And so that was kind of my first like real deviation from normal life was doing that. And
Well,
after
I'm
we
going to
go
jump
ahead.
in, Matt.
Yeah.
I want to know, for the audience sake, how this, because this is having little hints of familiarity about talking about fears and how we release them,
Yeah.
to A Course in Miracles, and how does this intersect with you? How did you find A Course in Miracles? How does this intersect what you're doing with your own spiritual journey? And we'll go from there.
Yeah. This intersects with my spiritual journey because I would say this was like gear one or maybe gear two, where it's like, I want something different, want something different. The spiritual journey was kind of the next step. So I was out of corporate America for a few years. We had traveled internationally, then came back. We're living in Boulder, Colorado. And this is when A Course in Miracles came into my life and my wife's life as well. And I was just listening to Wayne Dyer and this gentleman, David Hawkins, watching them on YouTube, and who else? Eckhart Tolle, Louise Hay. And I was thinking, why are they always mentioning this book, A Course in Miracles? Like, why don't, like, I feel like I have a lay of the land on most spiritual texts out here, and I keep on hearing this. And so if it comes up again, I'm going to buy it. And then sure enough, I was listening to Wayne Dyer and he mentioned it again. So I walked into the Barnes and Noble in Boulder, Colorado, and it was on display, A Course in Miracles, right in the front when I walked in the door. And it was on sale. I can't remember, like 15% off or something, the big 3-volume blue book. And I just bought it right on the spot. Didn't do anything with it for a couple months. But
What year was this?
This was 2015, I think. 2015. Yeah. 2015. And
it
then
was this 3 volumes.
Yes. So I have it. I'm not doing anything with it. I open it up. It resembles like paper from the Bible. And I was like, I don't like that. That seems serious. Like, this is Bible paper. This seems like it's going to be heavy. But I keep it. And my wife and I kind of talk about it a little bit. Don't do much with it. And then we start to read it, start to understand, like, we really felt like there's some truth in this thing. Like, there's truth in here, but don't know what it is. And it doesn't feel like there's a way to access it. It's kind of like this coconut, and I don't have like anything to open the coconut. And so kind of life goes on. We decide again to travel internationally. At that time, we get A Course in Miracles Made Easy by Alan Cohen. And my wife and I read that, and we're like, oh, now this makes sense. And then we get Disappearance of the Universe. Well, it makes even more sense now. Now we totally understand it. And we start opening it and reading it, and we're reading it every day. Kind of had an instant commitment to it. And we're traveling around the world. We really don't have much possessions at this point, no car, no house or anything like that. And it just kind of dawns on you at some point, like, if this is true, then really anything else we're doing or I'm doing, it doesn't matter in the same sense. It's like the magnitude of what this is saying is so huge that it's like, I really want to dedicate myself to this. And my wife felt the same way. And like all the other spiritual things that we were doing were like, you're in the neighborhood, but you're not at the right house. It kind of just felt like, and this just felt like, boom, like it's all right here. It's everything. It's a complete course. And so, we go on this journey, and the more we travel, the deeper we get into it. And it's been remarkable. I just would wake up in the morning, do a lesson, and then I would listen to Carol Howe's podcast where she reads the lesson and then discusses it a little bit, which is great. It's on iTunes too. Carol Howe's lessons. I can link to that in the podcast notes. But it is kind of this feeling like, okay, I'm just going to keep on putting as much time and attention into this as possible. And then finally it gets to a point where it's just like, okay, I can't remember exactly when, Tam, you and I met, and Judy, but we started talking and I started to help on the website. I think that was initially it.
Wait, before you were a continuous donor.
Yeah, I was a donor. That's right.
You had a really fun way of donating, like a percentage of something that you were making in investments or something like that.
Right. Okay. So what happened is that you guys I heard on a podcast that you were doing a fundraiser, and I thought, oh, I'll just donate a portion of what I'm making every month, which was very modest at the time because I just had my own small business, but it was an exact amount where I kind of made it the exact same percentage every month. So these donations probably coming in, and you're saying like, why does it have 38 cents at the end or 17 cents at the end? Or like, this is pretty random and exact. And I think that's what stuck out to you. And so I had that commitment to do that because I think the podcast I heard was about, hey, the Foundation for Inner Peace needs some funds. And so I was thinking, wow, what a shame it would be if there was no way for someone who really wanted this message to get this book. So I committed my mind to donate. And when I did, my business started doing better too. Coincidentally, no coincidence, like almost like the exact same moment. So, I was just doing internet marketing, one-man business, and just continue to contribute. Time goes on, and then I talked to you or Judy or Bob. Oh, Bob Rosenthal. It was Bob who I spoke to first, and co-president of the Foundation for Inner Peace. And I said, hey, I'm in Mexico, Bob. And he said, oh, he connected me with David Hoffmeister, 2017 or 18. And I went down there and I hung out with David and his community for a couple of days. And that was really fun. That was a great connection. It helped me go deeper and see how people who are living, this lifestyle of forgiveness and putting forgiveness first, what it looks like. So that was kind of the next step in the journey. Then I was talking to Judy periodically back then too. She was helping me, and my wife Beth. And then I came out to see you in Northern California in 2019. Sorry, I'm trying to piece all these puzzle pieces together. In 2019, I came out there, flew out and said hi, and met you for the first time, only time in person, and Judy and Bob and a few other people. And that was great to connect with everybody. And that actually was really important for me, that visit, because not only meeting everybody and seeing like, hey, they're just normal living, like trying to do this best you can, which is great to see that too. But I remember we said a prayer and I got to see the asking the questions process. And Judy described like, yeah, we just ask. Like we just ask. I was like, wait a minute, you can just ask questions? Like I didn't realize this. And my wife and I started doing that. And like we, pray together and just ask questions like, is this right for us? Is this right for us? Is this guided? Is this not guided? And we try to make them yes, no questions initially because those seem to be easier to get answers. But now, we can live our life pretty guided by just asking questions. And what a relief not to have to get into analysis mode, because I can really go deep on analysis, busting out spreadsheets, pros and cons lists. I mean, it's like endless for me, the amount of analysis I can do. So that was a huge, huge plus. Not to mention the outcomes are so much better when, we pray and just ask together. So that intention and following intuition has been just a massive, massive positive for our lives. I'm going to stop there because, it's a shortcut. I've been talking for a while here, Tam. I don't even know. It's
No.
Okay.
All of this is good stuff here. So, so let's go back to, so you got the course. We understand how that came through and your spiritual journey. as you have said, includes asking and that leading you to the lifestyle as well that you're in, because it's guided. And then want to get to, how did Miracle Voices start?
Yeah, that was interesting, because the first episode was recorded sometime in 2020, but I registered the domain before that because I felt like something was coming, and I was just like, Miracle Voices, boom, registered that. Don't know what's happening, but something is. So time goes on, and some months or year later or something, my wife Beth is talking to Judy on the phone, and Judy says, like, I feel like some recordings or something like that is like, I feel like guided to do that. And Beth goes, oh, Matt's been feeling that too, and he even registered a domain, and he knows how to do podcasts, and why don't you two talk about it? And then next thing we know, we talk about it, and it was like, I listened to what Judy's inspiration was, and then it was like, okay, let's just start recording some. And it was very kind of informal at first. I don't think we had a website. And we just kind of winged it a little bit. I just asked her questions about her experiences, and then she's like, well, I think forgiveness stories, we need to get forgiveness stories on here, just every, people out there that have them, so to share. And so that's what we started to do. And then after Judy passed, October 2021, Tam, well, first of all, you, me, and Judy, we talked about, like, hey, how is this going to go on after Judy passes? And
I recommended many people.
Okay.
And both you and my mother said no. My mother kept saying no. Everyone I recommended, no. And then she told me, Matt and I already decided it's going to be you. It's like, no. And finally okay, I'll try it. I'll give it a try.
Yeah.
And I was really irritated by the whole thing. Just because it was yet another thing, that I hadn't thought of for myself. And it ended up becoming one of the most fun times of my working life. It's not work. It's not work.
Actually, someone asked me this week the difference between your style as a co-host and Judy's. And I said, it's been very good for me to have you as a co-host, because your style is more improvisational and loose, and sometimes I can be a little bit rigid and planning, and it has to go in a certain sequence. So I said, Tam's more like a jazz, and I feel more like a Baroque classical music. So it's like, it's a good combination, a good fusion to mix it up, because I can tend to get rigid and formal on things.
Oh, no, you're fantastic. And, my mother's style she was just so present and, of course, knowledgeable. Although I will say I still haven't listened to either hers or mine with podcasts.
Are you even sure they really exist?
No.
This could be the longest con in history. Let's play a joke on Tam. Let's tell her there's a podcast, but there's really not.
I like the joke. As long as I like the joke, it's fine with me. Yeah. I don't care. But it would be a good one. I always thought that when I was really at a time where work slowed down and I was missing my mother, I would start to listen to the podcasts. And I don't see much reason why I would re-listen to my own, but with you. But they really have been such a gift to, certainly, besides to me, to my mother. She loved them so much. They were her favorite time of week. Didn't matter if she was in the middle of a heart attack or whatever. She could still push everything aside. But she did a podcast just a few days before she passed.
Yes.
And it was like any ailment or symptoms that she had disappeared, and she was present for that podcast. And it was wonderful to watch. Because I don't listen to our podcasts, although people say I probably should, I've gotten some comments like, you should listen to it because you'd know how to better yourself. And it's like, no.
Whenever you hear should, that's like immediate aversion. I'm going to run the other way.
totally doing the best I can. You and I do the prayer before everyone starts of I am here only to be truly helpful. And then what comes out, I trust is what's supposed to come out. But that does bring me to a question that was asked, which is who and what is the classical music piece at the beginning and end of Miracle Voices that I didn't even know we had. So
Yes.
what's there in this imaginary scam that you're running on me?
Okay, so there's one piece that we play in the intro and the outro. It's the Grand Valse Brillante in E flat major, Opus 18 from Frédéric Chopin, and you probably recognize it if you hear it. Most people are saying, "Oh, I've heard that somewhere before," but they don't know necessarily who the composer was. Chopin was a romantic era composer who lived in Paris. He was Polish, and I was recently described this to a Miracle Voices listener. Actually, they asked who the composer was, and I said he's often described as in self-exile from his homeland. And I was like, isn't that a perfect description for course students? That self-exile. But I always had an attraction to Chopin because I played classical piano when I was a kid, and the last, these, what are they called? Recitals. I did the recitals, and the last recital I did, I played one of his waltzes, and I just thought, wow, there's such a connection here. His work was so incredible. There was just something about it that, like, I always resonated with. In fact, one time I was walking in a city in Scotland with my wife Beth, talking about Chopin, and she said, like, pointed up, and there's on this house, it says Frédéric Chopin stayed here in 18 something or another. And I was like, what there is some crazy synchronicity going on here. So I just think he's a brilliant composer, just so many. And I think also a waltz is also a great way to think about the journey, because a waltz is kind of like this eloquent dance with these ups and downs where you're kind of swirling and going up and down and sort of, and you're all going together and it's better than a march or something slower. It's just the right balance of a way to think about, I think, the forgiveness or the awakening process. Seems like that's the classiest way I can think about it, is a waltz.
I love that. My mother had two very close friends, one who were married. One was Maria Janis, and she was actually Gary Cooper's daughter, and she was married to, and still is, I guess, to Byron Janis. And he ended up, now I'm going to get this wrong probably, but I've got to go back and check. He ended up finding some unfound compositions of Chopin, and
Really?
also was channeling some. We should get him on a podcast. It's an extraordinary story, and I don't want to misrepresent it.
Wow.
But all to see if that's possible. Yeah, so I love hearing that, because I didn't even know it. So thank you. Now I am going to ask you.
Okay.
We ask everyone, do you have a good forgiveness story you'd like to share?
I had a really big one that I've been working on for a long time, and I've shared about with Judy, and she helped me a lot with it. And about it, Tam, but I'm not ready to share that one. I do have one that I will share. And that is the story of, gosh, I guess age probably 14 to 22. And that was just, I went through just a severe bout of alcoholism. And a lot of people, I tell this story, they're like, man, you don't seem like this is something that would afflict you. And I'm like, oh yeah, it did. In fact, I started drinking when I was 14, and it escalated so quickly that by the time I was 19, I was in rehab for the first time. And I was just in really bad shape. Like, some people, it takes decades to get there. And for me, it was just an unbelievable, like a freight train. And then by the second time I went to rehab at 22, my skin was yellowish orange color, because my liver, I was so much stress on my liver, and it was really bad. I had delirium tremens, which is like you start to shake And if I didn't drink, I would go into a seizure. That's how bad it was. And, I had my first moment, what I would call a moment of clarity, where I remember sitting in this addiction specialist doctor's office, and I just had this moment where it was just like, listen to what this guy is saying and do exactly what's said, and you'll never drink again, and it won't be a problem. And I was like, what? And it wasn't a voice, but it was very clear. And I felt like it was such a curse, because I wasn't able to do all the things that other people my age were doing because I was in the bout of this terrible, terrible addiction that was so advanced that it nearly took me out. And what happened is I went along, and I see now, looking backwards in the rearview mirror, is that this was like a massive, massive meat tenderizer for my brain or my mind that was not even aware of anything that was going on. Like I would not, meat tenderizing, I think, is the perfect metaphor, because when you have meat that's too tough and it's inedible, you have to do some things to tenderize it. You put it in baking soda, you hit it with a mallet because it's just too hard to do anything with. And for me, that was exactly it. Like I felt like there was something wrong, but I had no awareness at all that, what it was. And so when I got into 12-step groups, the messaging is very similar to A Course in Miracles. They seem like cousins in a way. The books, they're different. Yeah. They're different but related, and they work on guilt and resentments and all these things in a very clear way. And that, how when you're opening a pickle jar and someone's working on it, they hand it to you, and you open it with the first one, you say, "Oh, I loosened it." Well, that was the first loosening, was like that. It was like hitting it with the end of a knife to loosen it, was like the pickle jar opening, was that experience with alcoholism. And I see only in the rearview mirror, like, oh, that's what happened. It felt like such an unbelievable curse, because I was like, why is this happening to me? I don't want, like, people would say, like, well, can you just drink less? And it's just, to me, what I was hearing is like, could you just like breathe less? Like, there's no logical reason why you should be drinking yourself to death, but it's happening. And I still don't totally understand the cause, but I do understand, like, I accepted higher power into my life and it went away. I can only think there's something in the unconscious mind that causes these things, and I'm really curious to know at some point, like how does this all work? I'm sure Carl Jung and Sigmund Freud would have some ideas about that, but that was the first truly, and I didn't know until I was looking in the rearview mirror what happened. So I had this perception, this perception of real fear and terrible feelings around it. But when I saw it was a positive, and I saw I could work with other people that had addictions and alcoholism, and I was able to help them, it all kind of changed my perspective on it. Like, that's I moved from fear to love on this. Like, oh, this is definitely not only a positive force, but perhaps the greatest positive thing that's happened in my life. And it's just been amazing. It's really been amazing. So that was, I quit when I was 22. So I'm coming up on 26 years here that I quit. But that was the first kind of real something where I knew there was a higher power in my life, and I could see it was totally undeniable. That was, and it also opened me up to the next chapters, which was like trying these spiritual paths. Like, okay, I'm these spiritual insights. Eckhart Tolle, this makes sense. What he's saying. Wayne Dyer, Louise Hay, David Hawkins. This is making sense, making a ton of sense. But I don't see the clear path. Like, these are all ingredients in some recipe, but I don't know what the recipe is. And then when A Course in Miracles came in, I'm like, oh, this is it. And a lot of the language, which would be equivalent to a steps and 12-step program, is very similar. And so I had the meat tenderizing from before I could use now. And so that, I would say, is my big forgiveness, is how that change of perspective about what that event was about, but that addiction was about, and the realization of what it meant for me.
Mm-hmm. No shame, no blame anymore.
Right.
And a pragmatic question, was it in your physiological DNA? Like, did you have family members who also were addicted to?
Well, I will say that our family tree is 100% Irish, so there's no other ethnicity in our bloodline still. But so that can give you a little clue. Like these Northern European cultures, it tends to be predominant. I don't like to comment about anybody else in nuclear family or extended family, but it is represented in the in my gene pool. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, all of that about the finding that DNA can affect whether or not one becomes addicted, or can become addicted, I should say, to different substances is kind of fascinating in that world. But again, it's how we look at it, how we deal with it, and how we perceive it. And there are a lot of people who have come to the course through very difficult addictions that have gotten, they've used the course help, as you said, as 12 steps in overcoming by releasing to higher power and shifting to a different, maybe it's even an addiction of spirituality, or a different way of being, the better way that, Ken and Helen asked for, because they were addicted to fighting with each other. It's really, I don't think I've met a single person in life who's not addicted to something, even if it's breathing or eating or whatever,
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I love the perspective. Okay, that's going to bring me to ask you, Matt, what do you do in your own times of ego storm?
Yes. I'm going to include everything I mentioned here in the podcast notes for people that are interested. So I have a few things I do. One that is super helpful is from David Hawkins' book. Letting Go is the name of the book. And it essentially, the way he describes it, this letting go process, is when you're caught in, this is more when you have like an emotional disturbance. And from his perspective, the emotions generate the thoughts. So he says, don't worry about the thoughts when you're in this ego storm or pain body. Just focus on the emotion, because these thoughts will go down dramatically once the emotion subsides. So he says, focus on the emotion. I'm feeling tremendous anger, anxiety, whatever it is, fear. And what you say next is, I accept this exactly what it is at this moment. Not that I wouldn't like to change it, but I accept it of what it is. And, you'll hear a lot of chatter, but this happened to me and this person, this circumstance. He said, ignore all the thoughts completely and just focus on the emotion of, let's say, fear. I'm feeling fear in this moment and I accept it. And he has some other visualizations he goes through, but it's really helpful. I do that for, depending on the situation, but I do feel a lot of relief from that. And I'll put that in the show notes because his book is great. You don't even really need to read the whole book if you don't want to. There's only one chapter he really describes it. The rest is he talks about the benefits of doing it and how he arrived at it. That's super helpful. There's another exercise from Eckhart Tolle that I include in the show notes about how, if you just can't get out of a negative thought loop, how an exercise where you focus on your hand and you close your eyes and you ask yourself a series of questions like, how do you know your hand's even there? He's like, well, you feel it, but how do you feel it? Like, how do you know it's there if your eyes are closed? How can you feel it if you're not touching something? And he does this to kind of bring the mind into the present moment instead of projecting into whatever the negative experience is. I find that extremely helpful. There's also another thing I do is there's this prayer that these people from the Solomon Islands sing, and it's called Jesus, you hold my hand, or your hand. Yeah, Jesus, you hold my hand. And they sing it in, it's like pidgin English. You can kind of understand it, but it's so beautiful. There's no instruments at all. So you have like the men singing the baritone, the women singing the tenor pieces, and the children singing like the soprano parts. And it's just amazing how they can just do this. And it's just so beautiful. I'll put it on the very end of this podcast so you can hear it, what it sounds like. But it's just such a beautiful song. So music's a part of it. Like I try to get my mind out of whatever the experience is with, some positive music. Walks are really big for me. Also, just like sometimes my wife and I will both say to each other, like, hey, I'm in a bad place. I'm just going to project right now, whoever's around me. So I'm just going to take a time out. And we both do that to the point now that we've come up with a nickname. Well, we'll just say the word. If it's such a bad ego storm, like there's the word, it's nothing that you're doing. I just need to work on this until it subsides. Like Eckhart Tolle would call it a pain body or ego storm, as we say. But those are a few helpful tips that I use that works for me. And that's why I always ask people what works for them, because I love those insights and ideas. They're just so practical. And a lot of people say they just accept it. And that's kind of like the David Hawkins one, like I accept. It's like a radical acceptance. Like I feel like shit right now. Like it sucks. I don't know why it started necessarily or when it's going to end, but just accepting it seems to help the awareness piece and just take some of the energy out of it.
But do you have the same word all the time that you use as a code word?
Yes.
What is it? Can you tell us?
Yes, I can tell you. And I can tell you the reason for it. So I don't know if you've ever seen the movie, The Incredibles. It's like a Pixar movie, Disney movie. And one of the characters in there is named Frozone. And actually Samuel L. Jackson is the voice of Frozone. And Frozone can make a weapon out of one drop of water. Like any small amount of water, you can turn into a weapon. And I don't know why that came to mind right away when we were searching for a word. I think maybe because we just saw the movie, but he like makes like dagger, like I make a dagger out of like one drop of water. And I'm like, that really kind of describes that feeling when you're in that negative deny project. So when you project on someone else and they have nothing to do with why you're feeling what you're feeling, but he can kind of make a weapon out of the smallest thing. Like I'm saying that the projection is a weapon, like not an actual weapon. So that's kind of what we came up with it. It's quick. We don't use the word for anything else. So it's like a shortcut word. You can just say like Frozone, and it's like, okay, I'm going to walk away and leave you. You're going to get some alone time for a little while because I know exactly what that means. And so we both say that.
It's so great. When my son was young, somehow we would get in these, head-on perspectives that the other one couldn't get out of. So, he would be trying to convince me of something angrily, and I'd try and convince him of something else angrily. And it was so obvious that we weren't going to get to an actual apology that the other one wanted from each other. And so when he was quite young, when he was about 3 or 4, I said to him, I think he was 3 actually, we have to find a different way out of this than to expect the other one to apologize when you're in that dark place. And I said, let's think of a word for it, a code word. And so he came up with grocery cart. And so when we're in the worst of arguments, when we couldn't get out of it and we were feeling awful, one of us would say grocery cart, and we'd have to drop it then and there.
I like that.
And it was an amazing. And then, hours later or even days later, there would be an apology for behavior that we weren't happy about, or for whatever the issue we were talking about was. We didn't expect it, but it did end up coming later. And I asked him, why grocery cart? And he said, well, because you put things in the cart and then you take them out. That was his reason.
Okay.
Like you put all that anger in and then just empty the cart right now, move on. And we still use it to this day, although as he got to be a teen, it worked a little bit less and less. Like, no, I'm not ready to grocery cart, but there would always, we'd come around to it. So it is such a great, great method. And, of course, deep course students many seem to use lessons of the day to remind them or open up the book and find something right at that moment to bring the peace. But I love the full-blown anything out there that brings us back to peace, or as you said, just a space to let it move through. And that's great. I do also want to ask you, on your path with your incredible wife, who I still want to meet, Bethany, known as Bethany,
Mm-hmm.
Who has been a great volunteer for us as well. How do you stay in sync with each other? Or is it just innate that you were both on the same spiritual path?
Yes, I think there is something there because, we're totally in sync, just very fortunate that way. And, both in terms of traveling the world with our kids, homeschooling, which is kind of unusual to begin with, but also that we're into A Course in Miracles, in this forgiveness process, and both like at the same kind of like we have morning coffee and we just kind of discuss these concepts all the time. It's like we're talking about it all the time, like we're on the exact same page. We went to high school together in Chicago, and we met there, I think age 14, and we didn't date seriously until sometime in college, but so we knew each other and we're kind of each other's orbit. And then after I was done with the alcoholism and got into kind of a spiritual direction, we got together, and it was shortly thereafter that, we were committed.
How beautiful. So she didn't ride through the alcoholism stage with you?
She didn't, but she did witness enough chapters where she was never like, "Hey, Matt, why don't you just have one beer?" It's kind of like the gremlins. Like if you just like put like a drop of water on a gremlin, they like turn from these like cozy little creatures. So she was never like really in doubt. She was never in doubt about like, "Hey, is this a real thing for Matt?" Yeah.
I was going to say, I'm sorry I interrupted. I was going to say we're really into the one drop of water.
We are. There's a water theme going on.
I love it. So I didn't even really talk about my own ridiculous naivete, that we have podcast notes that you're putting in. So I'm glad. I might have to look at our podcast, see the podcast notes. Thank you.
Yeah, and all that means is that if you're listening to this on like iTunes, you just like use your thumb and expand it, and below like the play button is a bunch of things from me that you can see. And thank you to Maggie Fitzsimmons, who puts it on YouTube. It'll also be in the description on YouTube.
Yay, thank you, Maggie. Okay, I'm actually going to start looking at our podcast notes. I love that.
Yeah.
Anything else that you feel like sharing about yourself, about the course, about...
I'm trying to see if there's any other questions.
Well, there is one. There's one big one.
Oh, yeah. Is it my comfort food?
It could be.
Okay.
Yes, but before we get to that, is there anything else that you want to share that people might be interested in, besides that you have a fabulous voice, devastatingly handsome, and are absolutely wonderful at doing this?
Oh yeah, people ask me if I was a podcast, like any experience in podcasting. I did host a podcast before. I no longer do, more in the business domain. It was about the business of the cannabis industry, and I was the host of that podcast. So I had a little experience with that, but I kind of just started that on my own. I didn't really have any background in that, but people are often curious, like, how did you get into this podcasting thing and like understand it, and like, where does that come from? So that is where it comes from.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. And another one. What do your children, how old are they, and what do they know about the course?
Okay. So my children, Madeline is 17 and Charlie is 15, and they are pretty fluent in the concepts. We talk about them a lot, and Madeline is now kind of reading some books and getting into it more. And Beth has kind of taught her about kind of the intuitive ask, praying and asking and so forth. So, you know, we were thinking about like what's the best gift you can really give your kids, and it's like, well, wait a second here, it would be, listen, follow, and understand what forgiveness is, like following your intuitive guidance and understanding what forgiveness is and how to do it. So we do try to integrate that in the most age appropriate way. I have to say they are they're impressive kids. I am amazed by them all the time, like their abilities, what they do, how they think. This Gen Z is is just amazing. Watching them and listening to them, so they have a lot of insights and stuff that I did not have as a teenager.
You've also given them the whole world, basically, in your travels with them and their ability. I imagine it's not easy to, you make friends, and that it's so like being an army brat, but in a whole different way. Um, as you keep moving, and it just everything I've heard, they sound so on the same page as you guys about their moving around.
Yeah, they do. In fact, a lot of people that aren't familiar with what homeschooling or world schooling is, like they ask about that, like, what about the kids and stuff. Like the kids actually, when we lived in Boulder, they were in school there, and they said, we loved it when we were homeschooled, and we want to go back to it because we just think it's so much better instead of this 5 hours of school, then 2 to 3 hours of homework. Like it was just so much more efficient. We could, study what we enjoy more. And they kind of gave us like their version of a kid presentation on why we should go back to homeschooling. And as soon as we decided that was a yes, then we are like, well, we don't have to be anywhere if we're homeschooling. We can do that anywhere.
Oh, that's so great. That's so great. And their ability to make friends. They have each other, or what is?
Well, they
How
do
does
have
the
each other.
gift?
They're very into this game paddle right now, which is really popular in Europe and Latin America. Which is, for people who aren't familiar, it's the fastest growing sport in the world. It kind of looks like a cross between racquetball and pickleball. It's very easy to learn, but difficult to master. And they meet kids that way. That's one way. Another way is that they've gone to a few summer camps over and over again where they meet, kids that they're friends with. And now, all night they're on the phone with their friends talking and chatting, and they're kind of sprinkled all over the world, these kids are. So it's interesting, their cross-cultural perspective.
Love it. Love it. Thank you. Yay. I hope people get more of their questions answered.
I was like, why does that sound? Oh, it's backwards. Okay.
I do everything asked backwards. We've already ascertained that. Okay, so now what is your favorite comfort food?
Okay, my favorite comfort food is a Scottish dessert called chocolate Tiffins. They're wonderful. The first one time I had one, I was like, "Holy cow! How did I live without this?" It's a no bake dessert that's like a cookie crumble crust or bottom. They're usually in a square or a rectangle, and they either have a dark chocolate or milk chocolate top, and there's a lot of butter in there and sugar and stuff too. But it's very dense. Like when you bite into it, it almost feels like, wow, I was expecting the consistency of like a brownie, but it's way denser. So it almost feels like when you have it in your pocket or something, carrying it like a paper bag, like you can really feel the heft of this thing. And I just think they're the best desserts, and you can find them all over northern England and in Scotland. They're just a great dessert. And then I'll give one more that's not a dessert, and that's meatballs. My wife makes incredible homemade meatballs and sauce that is just wonderful. And we have them a lot. And I actually just had them for lunch today and dinner last night. So that's unusual to have them that much, but just love, love. I don't like meatballs in general, but just hers are just wonderful.
That's so nice. I hope you put that in our notes too.
Yeah. And of
Especially
course,
with what's it called again? The Scottish
Tiffin.
Tiffin. The
Yeah.
Tiffins, right?
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah, I'll put that in the show notes too. Yeah. And
Yeah.
since I have editing power, I'm really just going to edit this whole interview down to just my comfort food, Tam. So don't be disappointed.
Me disappointed. I don't even listen to them.
You'll never know. Yeah.
I'm in the scam here. You can do anything you
want. The longest con.
Yeah. Completely love it. Accepting of this one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Matt. That's been incredibly enjoyable. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for listening today. Please subscribe to Miracle Voices by hitting the subscribe button on your podcast app. If you are enjoying these conversations, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you use. And lastly, please visit us at miraclevoices.org and join our newsletter so we can stay connected. Until the next podcast, I want to leave you with my favorite course quote: "When you want only love, you will see nothing else."